Welcome into this episode of the Rock Pod, produced for the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. I am John Gay from Jaggy Detroit Podcasts.
I am LisaB, your neighborhood realtor with Keller Williams Advantage.
And we are just the two of us today, kind of a special episode. We thought that you may have heard the Supreme Court had a ruling recently with regard to realtors, National Association of Realtors, real estate. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, particularly the New York Times put out a podcast talking about it. And when I sent Lisa the podcast, which we are not going to link in our show notes, she was really in her feelings when she emailed me back. She had some very strong opinions about this as somebody who works in this industry every day. So to clarify what exactly is going on, I want to go straight to the source. So Lisa, I guess welcome as the guest today and not the co-host.
Thank you. Well, there's so much misinformation out there about the NAR lawsuit that I really wanted to take this time to clarify with you guys, whether you're looking to buy or sell, so you understand what the facts are about this ruling.
Okay, so take us through it, if you would. Just how this started, what happened, and what we need to know.
Yeah, so basically the NAR lawsuit started because a couple of sellers got together and thought that they had overpaid in their commissions in selling a house. And I think it's important for everybody to realize and understand that you don't need to hire a realtor to sell a house. Now, this might be shocking coming from a realtor. You can sell your house yourself. The reason people don't is that statistics prove that you can net anywhere from 7 to 12% more by hiring a licensed realtor.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second, because you're paying 6% or whatever it is when you have a realtor. How is that you're netting more money by having a realtor?
Usually for sale by owners are selling their house to a friend or a relative. So it's somebody that, they're working a deal with. And there's also, keep in mind, when you're selling a house, this isn't like selling a couch on Craigslist. I mean, this is a very complicated transaction. And there's things like inspections, appraisals. Well, we as licensed realtors are there to guide you. You can trust us to know that we're going to help you get the most amount of money for your house when you're selling. And when you're buying, we're going to guide you through that process where if we do come into a situation or a problem, who's paying for that? How is that getting fixed? And oftentimes I can help negotiate in things like a lower asking price on the home. I can help negotiate in concessions. These are things that the average person with a full-time job doesn't understand the complexities of a real estate transaction.
Almost like when someone comes to me and says, how do I do a podcast? And I bring they pay me for my expertise, same way they would pay you or another realtor for your expertise.
So I think it's important to know that less than 10% of sales happen without hiring a realtor.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Over 80% of the lawsuits that happen come from these transactions. So it is very important that you do hire a realtor to help you through this entire process.
I want to put a finer point on that and make sure I'm understanding what you're saying correctly here. So less than 10% of transactions are done without a realtor, but 80% of total lawsuits come from that small amount of transactions where they didn't have the safety net of having a realtor.
Yes.
Okay, so back to the lawsuit. These folks, was it Missouri, I think, where it started?
Yeah.
So they felt like they were paying unfairly to the realtors. And where did it go? How did it proceed from there?
So basically, this one attorney took a couple of sellers and expanded this into a larger lawsuit, and then it became a class action lawsuit. Now, what's interesting to know about this is that even after the final all is said and done, all of the plaintiffs are only going to get pennies on the dollar. Like, I've heard different remarks. Some people were saying it was $7 each. Some were saying it was $10 each. Yeah, I mean, the sellers are not benefiting from this. The attorney is. The attorneys are walking away with over $587 million.
So the attorneys get paid, and then because this was open to oodles of people who have sold or bought a house in the last several years, you divide up that kitty, and it's not very much money at all. Okay, so one of the issues I know that you took with some of the reporting regarding this lawsuit and what's going to happen here was the characterization of the National Association of Realtors, NAR. Some of the media coverage has really painted the NAR in a really negative light. I know you took issue with that. Yeah,
so you have to understand, think about back when we didn't used to have a buyer's agents. It was only the seller. They were hiring a realtor to sell their house, and they were paying a commission and a marketing fee to get their house sold. Well, you had buyers that were completely unrepresented, and a lot of first-time home buyers trying to purchase a home with a professional realtor who understands about negotiating. I mean, you can imagine the kind of issues that came up. So NAR set this up to help buyers have some representation when they're buying a home, to help encourage people to hire them. That's why they set it up that way, because they figure, look, if you're selling a home and buying a home, it might cost you on the sell side, but on the buy side, you're going to get the benefit of having a buyer agent, and the seller ultimately is going to have the benefit of getting more buyers to come look at their house and a higher sale price if they're going to be offering this compensation for the buyer.
So the whole point of what NAR did was so that the buyer and the seller are both represented by a professional, is what you're saying.
Correct. And there's a lot of other things that the NAR is helping from a political standpoint. So there's a lot of good things that are coming from it. Now, I do want to talk about a little bit in some of these changes that are coming. And I want people to understand that cross state lines, we do not all have the same documents. So most of the changes that are going to be taking place are in, like, some states don't even have a buyer agency agreement at all. Here in Michigan, we clearly define what the buyer agency looks like. And we also have for our sellers, when we're sitting down with them talking about what our commissions are going to be, and they've always been negotiable, is, what does that marketing fee look like? And are you willing to pay a buyer agency fee? And that is all written into our contract and what percentage they're willing to give. And for years, that percentage has always varied. Now, keep in mind, you get what you pay for. So there are going to be a couple of changes that go into effect that will affect everyone.
Okay, so here's what we want to know. Go for it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about those today.
In a moment, Lisa's going to explain what the actual changes are. But before that, we want to dispel some myths. So, Lisa, if it's okay with you, I'm going to put out a statement, and you can put me in my place and debunk it.
Sounds perfect.
All right, we're going to do 4. Okay, first one. Commissions are no longer going to be that standard 6%.
Commissions have never been a standard percentage. They've always been negotiable. In fact, there's flat rate brokers, there's discounted brokers. They've always been available. Keep in mind, you get what you pay for.
Okay, myth number 2. The buyer is going to have to pay the buyer agent commission going forward.
In the past, it's usually the selling broker who is paying the buyer agent. And moving forward, sellers are still allowed to offer that buyer compensation. Now, they're not allowed to post it in the MLS. So if you're looking to sell your house, I just want to ask you right now, if you are not willing to pay that buyer agency fee, which is your right, but are you comfortable with getting 3% less for your home? The comps and how your house is appraised is based on past sales. Those past sales include all of the commissions and the sale price of the home. So another thing to think about, if you're not willing to offer that buyer agency commission, is a lot of buyers don't have those extra funds laying around to pay their buyer agent's commission. So you can expect to have fewer buyers putting in offers on your home. And we all know the more buyers looking at your home, the more offers you get. The more offers you get, it's going to drive the price up.
Absolutely, especially as we record this here on April 25th of 2024. Okay, next myth. House price increases are because of those commission costs.
Yeah, so I just want to address this one. And most people don't understand that the commissions are agreed upon between the realtor and the seller at the listing appointment before the home even goes up for sale. Now, what does drive those prices up? How many of you guys have heard about a bidding war?
Yep.
Now, if you only have one buyer putting an offer on a home, you don't have a bidding war. Now, let's say you have 20 to 30 buyers all putting in offers. You can imagine how much that drives the price up. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the commission that was already set before the house came up for sale.
It's supply and demand. It's not the commission that's already set, is what you're saying.
It is supply and demand. And we have such low inventory right now. There's not enough homes to go around for every buyer. So especially you see these homes that are coming up that are remodeled and they're staged. They're driving bidding wars, and the buyers are telling us what they're willing to pay for the home. They're driving the price up.
Got it. Okay, now to the important part of our conversation, the actual changes. And again, we're recording this on April 25th of 2024, so some of this could be subject to change. But as we sit here today, Lisa, what do we need to know?
So I want everybody to know, first of all, is that if you're going to look for a home, we need to have a buyer agency agreement signed before we go look at homes. Before, we used to be able to just take you out, show you a couple of homes, and then sit down and have this discussion. We want transparency in all of this, and we want you as the buyer to find somebody that you like and that you trust, because they're going to be guiding you through a very complicated transaction.
Sure.
So we want to make sure we have this conversation up front, and that you understand what your obligations are as a buyer if the seller is not going to be offering that buyer agency compensation. So we will have an agreement, and this agreement can be property specific. Let's say you aren't familiar with the agent and you're not sure yet if you want to get into a long-term relationship and work with them throughout the process, you can sign a property specific. Now, if you do like and trust your realtor and you know you want to have a working relationship with them, then you can actually sign an agreement for a lengthier time period. And that is all negotiable and can be determined and agreed upon between the buyer and the realtor.
All right, what else do we need to know?
The other change that's coming into effect is that we no longer can actually put what that buyer agency compensation is in the MLS. But this is the ruling, so we as licensed realtors can share it on our website, and we can still offer that, and we can definitely tell agents when they call up what that compensation is.
All right.
So one of the other changes that's coming into effect is, as the buyer, you may need to come up with that compensation if the seller and the listing agent are not offering a buyer agent compensation. So it's important to interview and hire a buyer's agent that you feel comfortable with. It's important to understand that as the buyer, you may need to bring additional funds to compensate the agent.
Okay. All right, Lisa, what else?
So think you're going to save money by contacting the listing agent directly? Think again. That listing agent is representing the seller and the seller's interests. It is now more important than ever to make sure that you have a buyer's agent who's representing your needs throughout this transaction. You want to build a trusted relationship with a realtor to guide you through this transaction and the complexities of buying a home. This is priceless.
So again, Lisa, a lot of this is still a little murky, a little up in the air, and not all of it is set in stone yet. So Lisa, what do we need to know as far as timelines on these proposed changes going forward?
So a judge did come to his decision in regards to the fact that we need a buyer agency agreement signed before we go show properties, and that we no longer are allowed to put the buyer agency fee in the MLS, but they just reopened up the case against NAR about a week ago.
Okay.
So this is still kind of up in the air. There might still be more changes. And in all honesty, a lot of these rulings that are coming out, they're designed by politicians and attorneys putting this together, but there's some real life things that we need to discuss, and how are these changes going to affect things like, for instance, FHA and VA buyers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to understand how these changes are going to affect VA loans for our veterans. They have donated so much of their time and dedication to our country. That's why we offer these VA loans. But within the ruling of the VA loans, they are not allowed to ask for concessions to pay a buyer agent's fee. So we're going to have to get a little bit more clarification on how this is going to affect veterans when they're applying for a VA loan.
So you're saying that politicians made some decisions without consulting stakeholders and people who work in this stuff every day on both sides of the aisle. I'm shocked.
Welcome to government.
I think it's important, and the big takeaway here, a lot of this we talked about today related to buyer's agent fees, but this stuff is very fluid, and that's why I wanted to have you on, Lisa, today to shed some light on some of these things. I think it's important, if you are buying or selling a home, to have an agent that you trust, and have an agent that that is staying up on all these current rulings and current events as they're happening, because you want to have somebody in your corner who is on top of all the latest changes as they're happening.
Yeah, and as a buyer's agent and even a listing agent, there's so many things that we can bring to the table. And everything from, we've got title companies, we've got partners that are in the profession as far as inspectors, contractors. We can help guide you through this process and make sure that all of the documents are filled out correctly. And I am a negotiation specialist, so I know how to help you get the most for your money.
Well, as you know, Lisa, we always ask our guests to give a plug at the end of the podcast. So somebody listening wants to talk to you, the expert in the field. How do they find you?
You can find me at my website. It's soldbylisab.com, and you can always call my cell phone, 248-981-3610. And you can find me on all of the social media sites. I've got a YouTube channel, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and you can find me there at Sold by Lisa B. If you guys are looking to buy or sell a home this year and you have questions and are curious about how these rulings are going to affect you, feel free to reach out and give me a call.
Lisa, I know it's important to you to have this discussion today because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So thank you for clearing all these things up. You can find me, John Gay, at Jag in Detroit Podcast. My website is jagindetroit.com. All my social media is Jag in Detroit if you have any questions about podcasts. Thank you for checking out this episode of The Rock Pod, produced for the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. For more information about the Royal Oak Chamber events, you can visit us online at royaloakchamber.com. Thanks, everyone.